Rosie tied my left shoe that morning. She'd been doing it since she was 6. An unsolicited ritual she decided was good luck and that I had no authority to revoke. She crouched on the curb outside the registration tent, her tongue out, fingers working the laces of a pair of running shoes that had more miles on them than the van I drove to job sites. I stood still and let her finish. When she looked up, her whole face was a question. You're going to win, right? I pulled her up by both arms. I'm going to run. She nodded like that was the same thing and handed me my bib. Number 214. I'd registered 3 weeks earlier, a last-minute slot that opened when a corporate team member dropped out. The Halverson Group Charity Marathon, 26 miles through the city's East Corridor, finishing at Landmark Plaza, to benefit the Children's Hospital, where Rosie Surgeon had given us back a year of breathing room. I was running because I owed that hospital more than I could pay. I pinned the bib to my shirt and looked at the start corral. The Halverson Group had 3 corporate teams in matching kits: compression gear, hydration vests, color-coded pace bands on their wrists. Their coaches walked the corrals with clipboards like they were managing inventory. One gave me a look when I stepped into the elite corral. A single practiced glance taking in the faded shirt, the worn shoes, the absent hydration vest, and then looked away, satisfied with his conclusion. That was fine. People had been drawing conclusions about me for a long time. I found my place in the corral. Beside me, a man in Halverson green, tall, well-built, race-ready, registered me with the same brief inventory look the coach had used. He smiled, not unkindly. You might want to start in the B corral, he said. The pace up here is going to be aggressive. Thanks, I said. I'm serious. Our team averages a 6:40 mile. First-timers usually get chewed up in the first 5. I appreciate it, I said. He was being genuinely helpful. That made it harder to hold against him. I stayed where I was. The CEO of the Halverson Group was 3 people to my left. I recognized her from the registration tent, where she'd been working the crowd, the kind of person who commands a room the way Weather does. Her name was Claire Ashford, according to the event banner. She was lean, clearly trained, with a pace band on each wrist, and a coach who had spoken to her in low tones for 10 minutes before the gun. She noticed me when the tall man stepped away. Her eyes did the same to her, his had the shirt, the shoes, the absence of anything that said I belonged here. And then she said something to the woman beside her, and they both looked, and that was that. I had Rosie's voice in my ear. You're going to win, right? I thought about a different start line 22 years earlier. A gray March morning in a city 300 miles north. Number 88 pinned to a singlet with my name on the back. My coach, Gil Tanner, in the warm-up lane. You run your race, Nate. You run the race you were built for. I hadn't made the Olympic trials that day. I'd finished 4 seconds behind the third qualifier. 4 seconds after 87 miles of qualifying races across 2 years. 4 seconds is not a gap you negotiate. It is the distance between one life and another. I'd come home to my father's tool belt, and my daughter, 3 years old, asleep in her grandmother's arms. I put the singlet in a drawer and hadn't taken it out since. The gun went. The first mile is always a conversation. The field sorting itself, paces finding their true levels, the early sprinters burning their best cards before the deck runs out. I know this. Gil made me run the first mile of every training session at conversation pace, loose and easy, the way a river runs before it narrows. So I ran that first mile at conversation pace, and half the Halverson team went by me like I was standing still, and I let them go. The tall man from the corral, I'd learn later his name was Preston, their anchor runner, turned his head at mile 2 and found me still behind him, still loose, still not working. He said something to the runner beside him. I saw his shoulders tighten slightly, the way a competitive person's do when they realize they haven't been taken seriously. I understood the feeling from the other side of it. Mile 3, mile 4. The city opened up on the East Corridor, and I settled into my stride. My stride is not a pretty thing. 22 years of tool belts and job sites had taken the elegance out of it, left it heavier through the hip, more functional than graceful. But the mechanics were still there, 22 years deep in muscle memory, and when I let them come back, they came back like they'd been waiting. Gil used to say a good runner's body is a library. Everything it's ever learned is still on the shelf. I felt the old chapters opening. By mile 6, I had passed half the Halverson field. Not by surging, not by sprinting, just by holding a pace slightly, steadily faster than theirs the way a tide comes in. Preston noticed at mile 7. He was running hard, his pace band abandoned, working off instinct. I came alongside him at the water station on Clement Avenue, and he glanced over, and his expression was a different one than the start line, less certain, more present. You've done this before, he said. Not an accusation. More like a man revising a document he thought was finished. A few times, I said. I took my water, squeezed it, dropped the cup, and went on. Rosie would be at mile 9. We'd mapped it out on the kitchen table the night before, her finger tracing the course printout. Here, Daddy, this is where I'll be. She'd drawn a small star at the Mercer Street crossing. I saw her before I heard her, the yellow jacket, the handmade sign that said Go Daddy in letters that leaned slightly right, as though even the words were running. I lifted one hand as I passed. She screamed something I couldn't hear. I carried it for the next 4 miles. Miles 10 through 16 are where a marathon tells the truth. The distance stops being about fitness and becomes about what you're running toward. I was running because a hospital had given my daughter back to me, because 8 years ago she'd been the smallest person in the largest room I'd ever been in, and the surgeons had done their work, and I had made a quiet promise in a waiting room chair at 3 in the morning that I would pay it forward however I could. 26 miles was the only currency I had. I ran those miles like a man who knows exactly what he's carrying. Claire Ashford found me at mile 17. She was a strong runner, genuinely strong, not just corporate event strong, and she'd been ahead of me for the entire first half of the race. But she was running on coaching and preparation, and by mile 17, the race had worn those down to their foundations, and what was left was effort alone. I came up beside her on the hill at Draper Street, and she heard my footsteps and turned her head, and I watched her understand that the man from the start corral, the wrong shoes, the faded shirt, number 214, was passing her on the uphill. She pushed. I'll give her that. She found something and pushed, and for 200 meters she held even with me, and I respected it. Then the hill crested and I opened my stride on the downslope the way Gil had taught me. Let gravity be your partner. Let the ground give you what it wants to give, and she fell back. I didn't look back. I never do. There's nothing behind you on a marathon that's worth the cost of looking. Miles 18, 19, 20. The city thinned to its quieter neighborhoods, row houses, corner markets, a few people out with dogs who turned to watch. An older man on a stoop raised his coffee cup as I passed. I raised 2 fingers. He nodded, the way men do when they recognize something in each other, without needing to name it. By mile 21, I was running alone. The lead pack was somewhere ahead in their own race, which had nothing to do with mine. The Halverson field was somewhere behind. I was in the silence between them, the long stretch, where a marathon is just you and the bargain you've made with yourself. I thought about Rosie's sign, Go Daddy in leaning letters. I thought about the drawer with the old singlet, and Gil's voice 22 years ago, and the 4 seconds that had redirected everything, and I thought it redirected you here, to her, to this. The 4 seconds were not a loss. They were a door. I ran mile 22 feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was complete. Mile 23 is where they say the real race starts. The wall, the place where the body has burned its stored fuel and starts negotiating with the last reserves. I know the wall. I have run through it more times than I can count, in training sessions on roads with no spectators and no finish banners and no reason except the one I brought with me. The wall is not a wall. It is a threshold. You step through it, and the room on the other side is huddled and harder and absolutely yours. I stepped through it at mile 23. My form changed when I did, something Gil had pointed out years ago. Under the deepest fatigue, the practiced form reasserts itself. The body stops performing and starts being. My shoulders dropped. My arms found their old angle. My stride lengthened without my asking. I was running the way I had run at 22, on the qualifying circuit, on the gray March morning with number 88 on my back. The way the body doesn't forget, even when the man inside it has spent 22 years carrying other things. An older man spectating near the mile 23 marker, white-haired, a foam cup of coffee, a race organization lanyard, leaned forward as I went by, and I heard him say something under his breath. I didn't catch it. It didn't matter. The finish chute opened up at Landmark Plaza just after mile 25, and I ran it the way you're supposed to. Head up, everything left on the road behind you. The timing clock above the arch read 2:40 wait when I crossed. Not my personal best, not the 2:18 I'd run at 22, somewhere in a results database from a qualifying race I'd never returned to, but a time that said something true about what was still in me. I stopped my watch. I walked to the side of the chute and bent forward, hands on knees, and let the body say what it needed to say. Nate Hollis. I looked up. The white-haired man from mile 23 was at the chute entrance, the lanyard identifying him as a race director. He was looking at me the way people look at a thing they can't quite place until suddenly they can. Tom Greer, he said. I was at the Northern States qualifying race in 2003. I worked timing for the trial circuit for 6 years. He paused. You finished 4th. By 4 seconds. I straightened up. That's right. He shook his head slowly, not in sorrow, in something more like wonder. I've been doing this 30 years, he said. I don't forget runners who run like that. I just didn't expect to see that stride come through my chute today. He offered his hand. I shook it. Behind him, the chute was filling. Club runners came through in the next few minutes, then the front of the field. And then, about 8 minutes after me, the Halverson team began to arrive. Preston came through, breathing hard, looked at the clock, looked at me in the recovery area, and did the math. He walked over. 610 average, he said, reading the splits board. He looked at me with something that was not quite disbelief, because the evidence was right there. Who are you? I do odd jobs, I said. Mostly carpentry and electrical. I'm also pretty good with gutters. He laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, and shook his head. Claire Ashford came through the chute 4 minutes after Preston. Head up, composed, a strong finish from a strong runner. She stopped her watch, walked to the recovery area, and found me standing there, and the calculus on her face shifted the way it had on the hill at mile 17. A rapid, quiet revision. She looked at the splits board. She looked at Tom Greer's lanyard, and at the way he'd positioned himself near me with the ease of a man paying a long overdue debt of recognition. She put it together. That was. She stopped, started again. I said something at the start line. Her voice was level, the tone of someone who means what they're about to say. It was dismissive, and it was wrong, and I'm sorry. I nodded. You didn't know. I should have looked before I concluded, she said. That was an honest thing to say. I respected it. No harm done, I said. You ran a strong race. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the chute, the finishers still coming through, the city noise settling around us. What do you do? She asked. Handyman work, mostly. Some finish carpentry. I paused. My daughter's surgeon is at the Children's Hospital. That's why I'm here. She looked at me for a moment. Something moved through her expression that I didn't try to name. Then she nodded, slowly, the way people do when a thing has landed that they'll need time to carry properly. Rosie found me 10 minutes later, pushing through the crowd with the single-mindedness of an 8-year-old who has decided the rules of crowd navigation do not apply to her. She hit me at hip height, and I caught her and lifted her up, and she inspected my face the way she always did after something hard, checking for the answer she already knew. Did you win? I looked at the plaza, the finishers, the families, the long morning light of an ordinary Saturday. I ran the race I was built for, I said. She considered this. Then she nodded, tucked her head against my shoulder, and decided that was good enough. It was.